AI can do a wonderful job in many ways, but it's never walked down the beach and felt the sand between its toes. It's read about it. It's never eaten ice cream. It's read about that, but it's never felt it. So that's what I mean by lived experience. I think that content and stories that truly resonate with people are you use those kind of touch points, the deeply human side of being alive. And like I said, I think AI can get close when you prompt it really well. But also there's a messiness that makes us recognize one another, the little mistakes we make. That's what makes us human. We are messy. AI is not very good at being messy. You can ask it to be messy and it'll try to figure that out, but it's really not the same. And like I say, I think people are very sensitive to this kind of nuance.
When brands rely on the same AI tools and prompts, they start to sound like everyone else. That loss of voice can hurt trust and lead to something called brand drift. So, how can B2B marketing teams scale content with AI while staying true to their story? Welcome to this episode of the B2B Marketers on a Mission podcast, and I'm your host, Christian Klepp. Today, I'll be talking to Nick Usborne, who will be answering this question. He's the founder of Story Aligned, a training program for marketing teams that want to scale content using AI while protecting the integrity of their brand story and voice. Tune in to find out more about what this B2B marketer's mission is. Mr. Nick Usborne, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Christian. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you on the show, Nick. We had such a fantastic pre-interview call. It was a bit of you did drop a few hints and clues about what was to come, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm going to keep the audience in suspense a little while longer as I move us into the first question. So off we go.
Okay.
All right. So, Nick, you're on a mission to equip marketing teams to scale AI-powered content while staying aligned with their organization's story and voice. So, for this conversation, let's focus on the topic of how to use AI for B2B content without losing trust. And it is, at the time of the recording, the end of 2025. And of course, we're going to talk about AI, but we're going to zoom in on something specific as it pertains to B2B content and a little bit of branding in there as well. But I wanted to kick off this conversation with two questions, and I'm happy to repeat them. So the first question is, why do you believe it's so important for brands and their marketing teams to embrace AI so that they can scale? And the second question is, why does this approach require the right prompts and guardrails? I think that's one thing that you mentioned in our previous conversation, the whole piece about prompts and guardrails.
Well, the first question, why do companies need to embrace AI? And the ridiculous answer to that, it's not a good answer, but it's true, is that because everyone else is, because your competitors are, and they will create content at scale while you are not, and they will achieve reach that you can't achieve without AI. And in fact, if they do it well, their new content will be very good content, deeply researched beyond perhaps what you can do. So it's like everything within AI right now. Like why do all the companies like OpenAI and Google and Meta, why are they all racing? Because if they don't, someone else will get there first. And I'm not saying it's a great reason, but I think it is the fundamental reason for companies to embrace AI is that you will be left behind if you don't. This is a transformational moment. And as much as we like to have choice, I think in this matter, we don't have a lot of choice. So that's my answer to that question. Repeat the second question for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So based on that, like why does this approach require the right prompts and guardrails?
As part of my business, I'm constantly researching this. And in particular, I'm researching the prompts people do. So when, say, it could be writers, coders, but in our world, let's say writers principally or marketers are using AI, they're using prompts. And they're generally prompting about two things. One is narrative, like what should we say, or please write us a blog post about X. So that's the topic, that's the narrative. And then they'll put in something say, oh, please do it in a voice that is authoritative and yet accessible. All right, so now that's a voice. What they haven't mentioned is what I think is the foundational layer, which is story. And that's important because story is the only thing that is uniquely yours. if you have narrative, if you have voice, if you talk about something in a particular way, I can copy that. With AI, I can copy it at scale. I can look at the transcripts of Christian's uh, podcasts, and I can say, oh, I want to do one in exactly cover the same topic. I can, So when you focus on narrative, on what you write about in voice, I can copy it. There's no moat. The only moat you have is with story, because every company's story is unique. We can look at origin stories, foundation stories. We can look at customer stories through case studies, things like that. Those are always unique. No one else has Apple's origin story. No one else has Virgin Atlantic's founder story, etc. But we did some research recently. Actually, we did some research months ago, and I reconfirmed it earlier this week. I ran it all again to look at the data. If you look at the top 20 prompt libraries, the big trustworthy companies and organizations that put out prompt libraries for companies. If you look at the top 20 libraries and the thousands and thousands of prompts within there, 76% of those prompts are about the narrative, what to say. 17 are about voice, how do you sound. Only 7% relate to story. So this, to my mind, is where we have a problem. We have a disconnect. Everyone is going crazy prompting for narrative and story, both of which have zero moat. Anyone can copy them at scale. And only 7%, this very small percentage, are actually focusing on the one thing that is uniquely theirs and cannot be copied or challenged. So that when you say when you say I'm on a mission, that's the mission for me to say, hey guys, wake up! You're prompting the wrong things in the wrong way. Let's go back and look at story.
Absolutely, absolutely. It almost sounds like an oxymoron if to a certain degree, because you're saying scaling B2B content using AI without losing trust. Because the narrative that I keep seeing on social media, particularly LinkedIn, is that if people are using AI, there is a bit of a trust factor there. But I think it's to your point, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's being able to embrace AI and you leveraging it the right way. So it's not to replace the writers, right? Or to replace the marketers. I hope not. Right?
It may replace some,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right, and the key word you mentioned there is trust. I think
Mhm.
trust is going to be the most valuable commodity that a company can have in the months and years to come, because people don't actually don't. If we're talking about brand, so we're trying to protect brand with story, right? And brand is something that a lot of companies have spent millions of dollars building and protecting over years or decades. And well, one of the things let me come back to trust in a moment. But if I'm looking at brand and I'm looking at all the stuff goes out there, it either builds brand or it burns brand. And if you burn brand, you lose trust. So if you're going out with a whole bunch of content that sounds like everyone else's, like it's kind of meh, it's ordinary, it's in the middle, which is what AI is really good at. Without the right prompting, it will give you kind of in the middle, meh, okay output. So you got to be much better at prompting than just like I don't know, being careless about it or taking shortcuts or being lazy about it. Because then you get brand drift, and all of a sudden the brand doesn't sound quite right. And when that happens, you lose trust. And when you lose trust, you lose revenue. I mean, you really do. And people are getting very sensitive to brand trust. We saw recently, was it Tracker Barrel tried to just change its logo? People
Awful.
freaked out.
Awful.
People freaked
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It was an awful rebrand, but yes. Like,
yeah, but it wasn't.
mhm,
These weren't saying, "Oh yes, I don't think the design is up to snuff." It's like,
mhm.
don't mess with my Cracker Barrel. We actually feel very strongly about the brands. Talk to people who are absolute fans of Apple. Doesn't matter that it costs twice as much and isn't perhaps as not twice as good. It's Apple. It's
Yeah.
my brand. Don't mess with my
Mm.
brand. So we're very sensitive to our loyalty to brands. And in fact, in some senses, brands define us like a football team, a baseball team. In part, we can be defined by the brands that we support, Coke or Pepsi. It's like everywhere. So when a company uses AI carelessly at scale, and all of a sudden that blog post, it kind of sounds like them, but something's a tiny bit off. And then that LinkedIn update again, yeah, it's them, but again, did they say, is that the same as they were 6 months ago? You get these little things that sound off, and now you get brand drift, and now you get people feeling uneasy. And the public are sometimes we think we can just make the public believe whatever we want them to believe, or companies to believe whatever we want them to believe. But actually, individuals in their home lives and in their business lives are very, very sensitive to brand, and they're very, very sensitive to voice and what they hear. And if it's off, they really don't like it. And that does translate into loss of trust, and that does directly translate into loss of revenue.
Absolutely. I'm going to move us on to the next set of questions, particularly that one pertaining to key pitfalls that marketers need to avoid when they're trying to scale their B2B content using AI without losing trust. So, what are some of these key pitfalls they should avoid, and what should they be doing instead?
What I'm hearing from inside a number of companies is that there is an inconsistency in how people are using AI. And even when systems are in place, the, not everyone follows the system. So it's early days. These are messy times for working with AI within companies. So I think it's really important that companies do have some frameworks in place, that people within the organization are using the same tools in the same way, and that they are encouraged to be consistent in what they do. So I've heard stories of where companies are set up, they're using Copilot or whatever they use, and then a manager will walk by someone's desk, and they're using Claude on their phone, their personal account on their phone, and it's like, well, yeah, but no, this is now you have no control. You also have to get people to do what they ask. I was talking to a founder the other day. She has a PR company, plenty of clients, and she's smart. She's created custom GPTs for each client. So each custom GPT is trained on with a kind of database of information on that client and the content, so that when you ask it to do something else, it's already has the context and the voice instructions and everything, and it's great. You get this consistency. But she says what's happening is some of her employees come in the morning, they start work on client X, and they're using that custom GPT. Then they move on to client Y, but they keep using the original custom GPT and not switching out. So the management has put in the structure in place to be consistent and to output the best content. But the employees are not always playing game, going along with that. So I do think we're in a messy period now where companies are not entirely sure how to apply this, how to structure it, what kind of frameworks and guidance to put in place, what guardrails to put in place. Like again, I've heard horror stories of people grabbing content that should not be shared and putting it into a large language model and then turning that into customer facing or public facing content.
Oh, plagiarism?
So yeah, it is messy. So what I would say is before you even try to make the best of the use of AI, that you do need to put systems and frameworks in place and educate your staff. So if you want your staff to use AI effectively, give them access to training. Don't just throw them at a tool and say go for it, because they won't know what to do with it. Or they'll be able to create stuff, but they won't be able to create good stuff. So invest in the systems, invest in the frameworks and instructions, and invest in training for the people who are going to be using the tools.
Those are definitely some relevant points. I wanted to go back to something you said, though, because I think it's really important. It's certainly one thing to have the prompts and the guardrails in place and some kind of like framework and structures. But to your earlier point, how do you enforce that? And I think you gave a really good example about like if you have a custom GPT and then they resort to like using Claude on their personal accounts, and then it's a little bit like the Wild West out there, isn't it?
It is, and it's how do you enforce it? Well, that's going to be a company by company decision.
Hmm.
Like the founder with the PR of the PR company, when she was telling me about how her employees just weren't doing what they were asked, I was like, part of me was thinking, well, why haven't you kind of cracked down on this? But again, it depends on the company and what options you have when it comes to enforcing stuff like this. But I do think you need to, because then if we circle right back, if you have people who are untrained, and that's the company's responsibility to train their employees. If you have people who are untrained and they're using these tools inconsistently, that is when you are far more likely then to see errors, for unforced errors, like publishing stuff that you shouldn't. But you're also going to see more brand drift because you're going to get this inconsistency between output. And that is a disaster. Like I say, companies have sometimes spent decades, years in establishing and building a trustworthy brand, and people are very unforgiving. You can lose all that goodwill very very quickly. So yeah, training frameworks, make sure people are working within those boundaries. But as a company, it's your responsibility to help make that happen.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. You kind of brought this up already, but you mentioned that AI can help to scale content, but it can't replicate your lived story. So please explain what you meant by that and provide an example if you can.
AI can do a wonderful job in many ways, but it's never walked down the beach and felt the sand between its toes. It's read about it. It's never eaten ice cream. It's read about that, but it's never felt it. So that's what I mean by lived experience. So I think that content and stories that truly resonate with people are you use those kind of touch points, the deeply human side of being alive. And like I said, I think AI can get close when you prompt it really well. But also there's a messiness that makes us recognize one another, the little mistakes we make. That's what makes us human. We are messy, and AI is not very good at being messy. You can ask it to be messy, and it'll try to figure that out. But it's really not the same. And like I say, I think people are very sensitive to this kind of nuance and the lived story. It's the it's the weird stuff, I think, that resonates. I've spent quite a bit of my career doing copywriting for companies, and for a long period, I was doing a lot of freelance copywriting. So this is just a little side note, a little side story for you. I used to live on like a hobby farm. We had some sheep and pigs and chickens and all that good stuff, the good life. And I also had freelance customers, and I went in and I went, you go out, you feed the animals, you come in, I sit down to work. And my client said, this was just on the phone, this was even before the internet. Client said, "Hey, you're late. How come?" And I said, "Oh, I was just out farming feeding the pigs." And the guy says, "What?" And because I hadn't realized, I never told him that I lived on a farm. He thought somewhere. So anyway, we talk a little bit about the pigs, then we get to work. So the project we're working on worked out really well and it won an award. So we fly off to your hometown, Toronto, for the awards ceremony, direct marketing awards ceremony. And he stands up and he says, "Thank you very much, blah, blah, blah. And special thanks to Nick Usborne, the pig farming copywriter." And I'm like in the audience and I'm thinking, oh, please no.
Oh no.
This guy has like rebranded me instantly in front of all my peers, all my potential clients for next year.
Yeah.
And he's called
Yeah.
me
Oh
a
no.
big farmer. Turns out, so that's messy. All right. AI
Mhm.
wouldn't do that. It wouldn't
No.
imagine that. It wouldn't do that. That's a deeply human moment of my humiliation and him laughing and everyone slapping me on the back and laughing and asking about my pigs.
Mhm.
Turns out over the next 12 months, I got a few phone calls out of the blue. And I say, "Hello, Nick Usborne." They say, "Oh, is that Nick Usborne, the copywriting news barber?" And I say, "Why, yes." And so I actually got work out of that because it was such a distinct difference from every other copywriter out there. I was the only copywriter who had pigs.
Yeah.
So that was just it's a fun story, but it also speaks to the difference between humans and AI. And that's a lived experience and it's a lived anecdote. And I tell the story and it's a true story. That is really important, I think. So even when we use AI, even when we use it at its best, and it can be really good when you use it well, I think everyone should leave space for the human in the loop, as they say. Keep that human element in there. Uh, dig for those stories. So I encourage companies to create what I call like a story vault. So
Hmm.
there's the obvious stories like the founder story, the origin story, the original success story. But also put in the little quirky stories like that one I just described, and make that part of your process. And also go, if you're creating something with AI and it's a big project, take the time to go and interview someone, talk to someone, get a human story, put it in. Just because you're using AI doesn't mean to say that everything you create has to be 100% AI. I do this all the time. I will create a draft with AI, then I'll go back in and I'll rewrite the beginning with an anecdote, like a small S story, not a big dramatic story, just a little story. And what it does then is that then connects it with us. Because as people, we recognize story. Story is profound to all of us. I think in every country in the world, parents read their children bedtime stories. It's something we share in common. It's how we communicate it's how we recognize our humanity in a sense of like if you tell me a story you connect with me and vice versa. So that's why I think stories are so important in this world of AI, because if you just go AI it can get a little cold, and sometimes as a reader you don't quite understand what's happening and why, but you kind of feel it. There's an absence, there's something missing, and what you're feeling is missing is that human touch, that human element.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's like telltale signs, right? Like the M dash being one of them. Um, and then
Or M dash.
yes, or yeah, or it tends to like regurgitate the same type of words. Like I find it loves using the word landscape or navigate, things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
Or it uses these funny like the colon for titles of episodes, for example,
Colons
right?
in titles. Even
Yeah,
when I give it clear instructions, do not use
not to use
colons,
them.
it still does it. Sometimes when
Yeah.
I create content like that, I'll create it in with one model, like say GPT-5, and then I'll take it over to Claude, and I'll say, "Hey, please edit and clean this up for me, and remove any repetition or whatever." And sometimes it comes back, say, "Hey, it looks pretty clean, pretty good." Other times it'll change stuff. And then, of course, always I will review. And that's the other thing that the companies need to think about is that at the moment, content generation at scale within companies, it's a bit like a conveyor belt in a factory of all these boxes flying off the end into the FedEx, back of the FedEx van, and without any kind of quality control, which is actually what you do have within if you're manufacturing and you do have quality control and you pick out every 20th item or whatever to make sure that it's good. A lot of that isn't happening. That isn't happening with a lot of people using AI. Is people don't even see it. It's fully automated, like a week's worth of social media is automated, or a month's worth, and no human has read it or reviewed it, and it's just flying out automatically. And that is where at some point you're inevitably going to have a problem, and it may not be a big problem. It may be lots and lots of small problems, lots of things sounding not quite right. And then all of a sudden, when you've got enough little things not sounding right, then you start getting a medium-sized problem.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly, exactly. Okay. Now you talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but talk to us about some of these frameworks and these processes that B2B companies can use to help them, organize themselves and reap those benefits of AI without losing trust. Like what are some of these processes and frameworks?
I do some training, and I have a kind of few rubrics where people can kind of use those to formalize the process. But I think if we talk about story, and I think I already mentioned the idea of each company having a story vault. So be formal and deliberate about it. Everyone can chat about their company stories, but if I say to you, "Hey, is there a folder? Can I get a Google folder and find a compilation of all of these stories? And have you graded those stories in terms of how strong and relevant they are, and how engaging they might be, or how evocative they might be?" And the answer is almost always no. The story's around, but there's no story vault, and there's no rubric in place to grade those stories and decide which might be the most appropriate points at which to share those stories. So it's that formalizing the process. And I don't like being 100% rules based, but I think in the AI world right now, where we are in that kind of messy middle period, I think it's really important to have some systems in place so that we do have a consistent output, so that so that your brand doesn't suffer from brand drift, and that you don't make some significant missteps along the way. So somebody within the organization needs to be responsible for this. Maybe it's the chief AI officer, if you have one, or otherwise somebody in marketing. So yeah, help people with training, but also help them by giving them some frameworks, some rubrics, and some just a system. Like, hey, you picked up a story from customer service, put it in the story vault, categorize it, customer service in the story vault, so someone else can come back and find it. So it's not just word of mouth, it's not accidental. There's a place where people can go to. And then you're going to do the same with narrative, the things we say, and you're going to have another vault, as it were, and another rubric to assess voice, how we say it. So it's just this formalization of the process, and also trying to make sure that people use these systems once you put them in place. So somebody's got to be walking along behind and sort of, and again, it's like, I guess, like early days of anything. Not everyone will love the process. Not everyone loves using AI. Um, but it'll come. It'll come. People will get in the habit of not only using AI but doing it well and following these processes.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Let me just quickly recap because I was writing this down. So obviously having a story vault, um, grading them if you can, if possible, having systems and frameworks in place, training the team and getting them to familiarize themselves with the systems. Having a vault for narrative and voice, I think, was the other piece. And finally, using using the systems once you have them, not letting them collect dust, as it were, right? Like,
And it is. I get it right now. I get
mhm,
it. It's hard
mhm,
for a lot of companies because
sure,
I think using AI has been very kind of mixed. Some companies have dived straight in. Others are resistant. Particularly companies that have compliance issues, financial, medical, stuff like that. They're being very careful, very cautious, and for very good reason. So the rate of adoption is very uneven at the moment.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, Nick, you've given us plenty here, right? But if we're going to talk about actionable tips, like something that somebody who's listening to this conversation that they can take action on right after listening to this interview, what are like some of the top three things you would advise them to do?
Well, I guess first is just to, we've talked quite a bit about the story vault, collecting stories. Just do that. Because like I say, I think story is your superpower because it is the only place where you have a moat. You don't, in what you say and how you say it, anyone can copy you. And I can automate copying you through AI as well, but I cannot steal your story because it's just not true if it's not my story. So I'd always start there, and again, start that, build the vault, collect the story, and formalize that process. Interview the founders if you can. Interview early employees, even if they're retired. Interview the first three clients if you can access them. Interview customer service. So often overlooked customer service in one way or another. So long as that's not all automated, if there's still humans in that loop, then have conversations with them. And you can get transcripts, customer service transcripts, and feed them into AI and say, hey, please analyze and summarize this. What are the most powerful messages we can get from our customer service sort of stream of content? Do a sentiment analysis. What are people upset about? What are people happy about? So yeah, story I think is like I say, it will be your motor, it will be your savior. So first, start to formalize that process of getting story and then making sure that it finds a place somewhere in your automation of AI generated content.
Fantastic, fantastic stuff. Okay, soapbox time. What is a status quo in your area of expertise that you passionately disagree with, and why?
I guess again, I'm just kind of overlapping. I don't know whether it's status quo, but the thing that I passionately disagree with is every time I see post or a social media title that says top 20 killer unbeatable prompts.
Oh yeah,
No, no,
yeah,
no, absolutely,
yeah,
just
yeah,
no.
yeah,
For two
yeah,
reasons.
yeah,
One is that
yeah.
they are going to be generic. They're not going to apply to your company in particular. They'll be generic. And just because they work for someone else does not mean they're going to work for you. Um, and like I say, I've done research on those prompt libraries, and only 7% of them even touch on story. So if I'm right and story is the most important thing, almost all of those prompt libraries are missing out on that. They're just focusing on narrative and voice and ignoring story. So not good. And yeah, so that is, I don't know whether it's status quo, but it's something I keep seeing and it irritates me every time I see it. When I get it, I understand why they're
Yeah,
doing it, but not helpful for your company.
yeah, yeah. You and me both. I mean, those are the posts that I tend to ignore immediately. I mean, I just skim through it and see the prompts, and I'm like, nah. But I think it's human nature too, isn't it? Like everybody wants to chase the next hack. They want to find the shortcut, like the quickest route to get something done. And I get that, but it sometimes does more harm than good. Mm,
Easy button. But
yeah.
also to be fair and to be a little bit more generous,
Mm,
this is early days. And so people
yes.
are looking for help. And if it says top 20, it says, oh my goodness, thank you. I'll take that. Now, over time, that'll change and people will become a little more sophisticated, I think. But like you, I get it. I understand why those posts and titles are attractive, and that's why people create them. But we can do better. We can do better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can and we will. Um, hopefully. All right. Here comes the bonus question. I've been thinking about this one, but
I feel strangely nervous. I feel nervous. What is this bonus question?
just breathe. Just breathe. I mean, clearly from this conversation, writing is in your blood, right? It's something that you are passionate about, but it's also something you've done professionally for a long time. I suppose the bonus question is if you had an opportunity to meet your favorite writer or author, living or dead, who would it be, and what would you talk about?
One of the people I really admired, and I've already spoken to him, is
Hmm.
David Abbott. So David Abbott is a copywriter from England, and he had an agency called Abbott Mead Vickers, and he was an amazing writer. So I've already met him. Who I haven't met, I would like to meet is Susie Henry. She was the copywriter behind a series of advertisements in the UK for an insurance company, and she is just a delightful writer. So I told you, well, no, I haven't told you. Maybe I will tell you. I mean, like when I started out copywriting, it was at the tail end of the Mad Men period, and creatives were the kings and queens. And copywriting was such a craft. It was something to be absolutely proud of. Like we'd go through so many drafts. And it was, I was a craftsman learning from other craftsmen. And David I met, he was a fantastic writer. And Susie Henry, so good. Very, very conversational writer, which was very unusual for that time. So I'd like to meet and talk with her. Um, and I still can't remember the fiction writer. He's a science fiction writer. I've completely blanked on his name. And I've actually met him once briefly, but I'd like to get back to him and chat. But I can't because he's since passed.
Oh, I see. I see. I see. All right. Well, that's quite the list of people. All right. No, but but yeah, no, fantastic. No, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your experience and expertise with the listeners. And please, quick introduction to yourself and how people can get in touch with you.
All right. Hello, my name is Nick Usborne. So I have a business called Story Aligned, so storyaligned.com. And what we do there is pretty much what I've talked about today is we train teams within companies to look at story, narrative, and voice with a lot of emphasis on story because that's where the moat is. So if you go to Story Aligned, you'll find we have a white paper you can download. We have a blog that you can read. There's a description of the training. So yeah, if this interests you, if you find this an interesting topic, there's plenty to do when you get there. So story aligned, ALIGNED. Yeah, story aligned.
Fantastic, fantastic, and we'll be sure to pop that into the show notes so that it'll be easy for everyone to access. But once again, Nick, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah,
One last thing. If you want to,
please.
opening myself up, if you want to just talk to me directly, you can write to me at nick@storyaligned.com.
Perfect, perfect. Nick, once again, thanks so much for your time. Take care, stay safe, and talk to you soon.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye for now.